All right, so for today's class, we're starting a new theme, which is Caribbean economy and slavery. And so what we're doing is that we're going to look, the topic that we're doing today is the origin of African slavery in the Caribbean. Now, last term we looked at Caribbean, we looked at indigenous people and Europeans. And this term, we're going to look at two themes. We're looking at Caribbean economy and slavery, and also we're going to look at resistance and revolt. So when we return in September, if I'm your teacher, uh, when we return in September, uh, we are going to look at metropolitan movement, adjustments, and then when you return for the last term for for fifth form or grade 11, you're going to look at the United States in the Caribbean, and then you're through. Based on how things is progressing, if we don't have much or if we don't have any disruption within this term, everything should go fairly well, right? Should. And I think that we're on track in finishing the first part of the syllabus within this year, which is good. Now, Caribbean Econ, and the truth and in fact, you're not behind. Uh, in previous years, well, in previous years, this is where we usually start in January, right? So you're not behind. Uh, so it's not like some people would say that online school people are behind. No, I don't think so. No, so let us look at slavery. What is slavery? When you hear the term slavery or slave, what comes to mind? What is slavery?
Sir,
Go ahead for me, please.
sir, the first thing that comes to mind is bondage.
So we could say slavery, bondage comes to mind. Very good. Correct. Anyone else?
Sir, like being forced to work without any pay, food, and like clothing and stuff.
So forced to work without food, without getting paid, all of these different stuff. Yes. And so both answers are, to some extent, they are correct. That is what comes to mind when we hear slavery. Now, every single society had some form of slavery. Whether in the Caribbean had slavery, whether in Europe they had slavery, in uh, Africa also had slavery. In fact, in Europe they had the Serbs. It, which is like servants. So Europeans enslaved some of their very people who they think were lesser than them in ethnicity. And so the Serbs were enslaved. Also in Spain, we know for sure which group they Spain enslaved.
The African, sir.
Yes, they would have enslaved the African, but
Sir,
what
the
they
Moors.
the Moors, very good, very good. So they would have also practiced some form of enslavement when it comes to the Moors. And so in Europe, they also had some form of slavery. In Africa, if you owe someone something, right? If you owe someone something in Africa, you owe a debt, then usually you could become a slave. If also in Africa, if you have different tribes or different ethnic groups. So not everyone in Africa had the same culture. Africa is a very diverse place. And so you have different people with different cultures, different perspective, and all of these different stuff, different leaders. So we call them tribe. And so in tribal warfare, if you go into a village and you get somebody, you capture, disrupt a village and you get people from that village, you could enslave them. But the thing with African slavery is that while they use the word slavery, they were really servants. They were considered persons. Same thing with European slavery. European enslaved other persons, they were considered other groups of people, they consider them people, right? Even when the Spain at first would have enslaved some of uh, the Moors, they were really considered person. You enslaved them for a period of time. It was not something that was everlasting. It was not lifetime bondage. So you had African slavery. You could not treat an African slave badly because you could go to face punishment or you could be enslaved yourself. So you had to treat them properly. But there's a type of forced labor that happened in the Caribbean and in the Americas that the world has never seen before. Never. And that was called chattel slavery. Please note the term, chattel slavery. Now, chattel slavery is very different from slavery that existed in Africa or slavery that existed in Europe or other parts of the world. The slavery that existed in the Americas or the Caribbean was a latter form of slavery, and the world has never seen something like that before. And chattel slavery, chattel means something that is movable. And so in the Caribbean, you consider them to be property, movable property, chattel slavery. And so they use them for forced labor. But I'm going to go into this a little later on in the lesson. For now, I want to look at the different forced labor systems in the Caribbean. So for example, one of the first system that we have seen from your studies where there was some form of forced labor in the Caribbean was the system. What is that system called?
Encomienda.
The encomienda system. Now, what led to the decline of the Amerindian groups? What led to the decline? Come on, ladies, we did that. What led to the decline?
So diseases and
Forced labor.
One
Disease.
more time for me, please. So one, diseases was one that led to the decline. Next,
Sir, suicide.
suicide. Who committed suicide?
Sir, the Amerindians.
Very good. What else led to the decline?
Sir, starvation.
Some of them starvation, yes. What else?
Or they were overworked.
Overworked, very good. Yes. So these were some of the things that led to the decline of the indigenous people. And so the Spanish granted the Portuguese a license. The license was called the Asiento, and they were allowed to sell Africans as slaves in the Caribbean. So that is how some Africans would have arrived in the Caribbean as slaves. Now, another thing is that you had a priest by the name of Las Casas, and he said that the Indians were treated poorly. And in order to save the Indians, the indigenous people, he recommended that Africans should be used as slaves. Now, this Catholic priest was one of the first to recommend the use of Africans. And he wrote to the Spanish crown, and he said, why not use Africans as slaves instead of the indigenous people? Brazil another reason why they would have used African was that Brazil, that was colonized by both the Dutch and the Portuguese, first by the Portuguese, then the Dutch came and took over a section. They experimented or had some form of experience with African slavery. They were the first, Brazil was the first to import Africans as slaves in the entire Americas. First. In fact, they were the very first place to establish plantations in the Americas, Brazil, long before the Caribbean. And so what we are seeing here is that after a period of time, other European countries came and they captured. Name the other European countries that came and took over places in the Americas. Other European countries that
France.
France and also Britain. Very well. Thank you very much. And so up to the 1500s in the Caribbean, although the Spanish would have granted the assignment to sell Africans in the Caribbean, and also the priests would have recommended the use of African, or they had the experience of Brazil, who was the first to import Africans. Up to the 1500, the number of Africans in the Caribbean was very small. Not a lot of Africans were actually used as slaves. Some historians say that Africans were here before Columbus. When you reach the sixth form, you will discuss that. But for now, up to the 1500s, a small number of Africans were used as slaves, a small number. But this changed significantly. African slavery is going to expand in the Americas, in South America, Central America, North America, and the Caribbean, like we have never seen before. All right? Reasons for the expansion. One of the main reasons was that the Caribbean colonies used to produce tobacco, and they used to send the tobacco to Europe. Who they used to produce the tobacco? They use a small number of Africans to produce the tobacco. They use indigenous people to produce the tobacco. And they also use indentured white workers or indentured European workers. So persons in Europe that would have done very bad, they would have been criminals, they were poor, pauperized white persons. They brought them into the Caribbean and they worked in the Caribbean on the tobacco fields. So that is one reason. The decline of the indigenous people led to the expansion of the Africans. Next, Virginia gave the Caribbean competition. Now, I don't know if the exam will ask you to find the place Virginia, but since lately I'm seeing where they're asking students, 1 second. I'm coming, ladies. This is loading. All right, ladies. Let's hope that this is coming along. All right, ladies, this is not working out. All right, so I'm switching back to the PowerPoint. Anytime you want the computer to work, it always giving problem. Always. All right, now. All right, so I wanted to show you Virginia. So for your homework, what you're going to do, you're going to take a map and you're going to find Virginia, where Virginia is located. And also, very important for you to do, also find Brazil, find Barbados. All right, those countries. All right, Christian, all right. Barbados, Virginia, Brazil. Very important countries that we're looking at. So Virginia is going to give the Caribbean colonies a competition, serious competition. So Virginia is located in North America. It was a British colony. It had quite a lot of lands, right? The quality of their tobacco was better than the Caribbean tobacco. It was cheaper because if you are producing much more tobacco than elsewhere, then your tobacco is going to, you could price a tobacco in such a way that the price of the tobacco is going to drop significantly. And so the price of tobacco is going to drop significantly, and the Caribbean planters are not going to be able to match up to Virginia, because one, Virginia is producing much more tobacco. They have way more land. They are using a lot of science in their production of their tobacco. They are selling it at a cheaper rate, and the Caribbean just could not compete with Virginia, could not. And so, out of the blues, the English settlers in Barbados said, listen, the Caribbean is doing so bad, whether the French Caribbean, the Spanish Caribbean, or the English Caribbean. We're all doing poorly when it comes to this tobacco production. So the English settlers in Barbados said, listen, we need to experiment with sugar, right? Sugar cane. So they got the Dutch from Brazil to help them to implement sugar production in Barbados. And we know for sure that sugar, and when we study it more, we're going to see that sugar was an intensive crop. Oh yes, intensive crop that requires a very large labor force. And so most of the indentured workers would have died, not the indentured workers, the indigenous people would have died. So they said, no, we can't use them. You European indentured servants that worked on the tobacco plantations, not plantation, the tobacco fields, they were also, a lot of them that they had a high mortality rate. They would have died from tropical diseases. Some of them were on contract, so it was like 4 to 5 years contract. These were white persons who were contract. Indentured mean contract labor. And after they finish the 4 to 5 years, some of them decide that they're going to return to Britain, or some of them decide that they're going to remain in the Caribbean. at the end of the day, they said, no, we can't use them. They are not able to cope within the Caribbean. The Amerindians are also not able to, our indigenous people are not able to, we can't use them. And so they said, listen, the best person, our best group of people to use is the Africans. Why not use the Africans? And so they are now going to implement sugar production. Why sugar is going to be such an important crop? Sugar is, you need more lands for the production of sugar. Sugar at the time, Europe used honey as a sweetener. Honey was very expensive. Even today, honey is super expensive. Sugar was more profitable. You could use sugar as a sweetener for tea, for pastry, and for preservative. And so the change over in the Caribbean, where people change over from tobacco to sugar, was called the Sugar Revolution. It was called the Sugar Revolution. The drastic change over from tobacco production to sugar production is called the Sugar Revolution. And so Gabriel Morgan, Gabriel is not here. Janelle Norman, Janelle.
Yes, sir.
So explain to me one reason why there was a change over from tobacco to sugar. Just one.
So they needed to expand their economy because both the Spanish and the Britain were poor on either side.
All right. Anyone want to help out?
Sir, they had competition from Virginia, and they
So
noticed tobacco production wasn't as good as theirs, and it wasn't profitable for them.
thank you very much. So one of the main reasons for the change over from tobacco to sugar was that they received competition from Virginia. Why they receive, how are the reasons for the competition was that one, Virginia had much more land. They produced way better quality tobacco. It was cheaper because they sold their tobacco at a cheaper price. And so Europe tend to buy Virginian tobacco over the Caribbean tobacco. And so as a result of this, the Caribbean, as a result of this, the Caribbean decided that they are going to change over from tobacco to sugar. Who was the first person, which country in the, or which territory in the Caribbean was the first to make that recommendation or experimented with sugar? Which
Sir,
country was it?
Brazil
Brazil is
or
in the Caribbean.
Barbados?
Barbados.
Thank
Barbados.
you very much. Barbados, where they so they experimented with sugar. Edwards, are you here? I'm seeing you in the stuff, but I'm not sure what is going on your side. Edwards? Edwards? Ladies, I'm calling Edwards for the last time. There's nothing in the chat. Sterling?
Sir, Sterling mic isn't working.
Isn't working? But Sterling, you're able to answer. Could you type the answer for me, please? I want to ask a question. What was the difference between African slavery and Caribbean slavery? What was the difference between African slavery and Caribbean slavery? So while you type it in the chat, Gabriel Morgan, you can go ahead.
Sir, I logged off because my Wi-Fi went away, so I'm not sure.
All right, no problem. All right, so here, ladies, we see that there is a change over from tobacco to sugar, which is called the sugar revolution. Now, as a result of this change over from tobacco to sugar, they're going to use Africans from Africa as slaves to work on the sugar plantations. And so the number of Africans are going to increase significantly in the Caribbean. Africans are not only going to be used for sugar, but they're going to be used for tobacco, in North America, wheat, in North America, corn, in North America, but also cotton, cocoa, coffee, mahogany, and logwood. So these are some of the areas that they are going to use Africans for. In fact, they are going to export over 15 million Africans from Africa to the Caribbean, not the Caribbean, to the Americas to work on sugar and other production. Now, the question is, before I go to the question, Janelle Norman? Janelle?
Yes, sir.
What was the change, or what do we call that change over from tobacco to sugar?
The sugar revolution, sir.
Very good, the sugar revolution. Thank you very much. Davis? Daniel Davis?
Yes, sir.
What, all right, so for you, Davis, I'm asking you this question. How did Virginia give the Caribbean competition? In what area?
Repeat, sir.
In what area Virginia gave the Caribbean competition? In what area Virginia gave the Caribbean competition? Renee Lorraine? Renee? Renee Lorraine? McLeish?
Sir, Renee typed in the chat.
Somebody, could you read what she said for me, please?
Sir, she said yes, sir.
Just yes?
She said
But
yes, sir.
I'm asking a question.
She's asking you to repeat the question.
In what ways did Virginia give the Caribbean competition?
So the selling of tobacco,
Huh?
the selling of tobacco, like production, something like that.
What about tobacco?
Sir, Lorraine, Renee said, would it be the tobacco production and sugar?
All right. All right, ladies. So what we're going to do is I'm going to post the recording and I'm going to ask you to